Why would you allow your wife to be put in that position? I would never put my wife in that position, not for social media, not for money, not for anything.
Has really plateaued and sort of reached their peak. I think a lot of influencers in the US are actually on a journey of self-discovery.
Something is happening behind the scenes. Something that no one expected. And now, after months of silence, after weeks of whispers, after days of stories flooding every corner of the internet, Candace Owens' husband has finally broken his quiet. And what he says is shaking the entire situation. Because according to him, the woman the world thinks they know is not the woman he lived with, not the woman he protected, not the woman he defended publicly, privately, and politically. He says, she's not what you think. And the truth behind that sentence is far more complicated.
We shook hands and I just knew, kind of, when I met her, I was like, this is a woman who, she just commanded a power. Nothing romantic was said, you know, between that day and the day that we got engaged, nothing romantic was said at all. You know, there was no
far more emotional and far more painful than the public realizes. But before we break down what he allegedly revealed and why it changes everything, we need to go back. Because this story didn't start with drama. It didn't start with chaos. It didn't start with accusations, fame, or political storms. It started with two people who believed they were meant to build something together. But here's the twist. Sometimes the person you fall for is not the person you end up discovering. Sometimes the version of them that captures your heart.
You were born a man and you will die a man. That's the point I'm making. So give us a sample. I'll send my doctors to take your blood. Figure it out real quick. I will see you in court.
Is not the version of them that remains. And according to George, the man who once stood at Candace Owens' side, that's exactly what happened. They met fast. They connected quickly. To the outside world, it looked like a perfect match, a rising political voice and a polished, influential businessman. Two people who appeared strong, confident, and united. But the truth? Their relationship moved at lightning speed. It was the kind of romance people describe as destiny, and others describe as too fast to see the cracks.
Email, that checks out. Yeah. Secret Service, the FBI, the DEA being involved, why this plane found something out and it cost him his life. That's the truth.
17 days. That's all it took for them to decide they wanted forever. But forever didn't see what was coming next. Because while the world only saw their success, the headlines, the speeches, the interviews, the picture-perfect posts, behind the scenes, the pressure was building, slowly, quietly, and then all at once. According to people close to the couple, George admired Candace's intelligence, her fire, her boldness, but he also feared it. Not in a physical way, in a future way. Being with someone that powerful, one insider said, is like being on a roller coaster without a seatbelt. You hold on because you love them, but the speed keeps increasing. And George?
Important to share that information, as Kanye sent me all of the messages, people who were threatening him, I have them all, to information share with Max Blumenthal, with people, people all over the place.
He wasn't built for chaos. He grew up in a world of order, tradition, quiet influence, calculated decisions, steady reputations handed down through generations. Candace grew up in a world of fights, battles, survival, reinvention, audacity.
Anything happens to me, blame the Zionists. Like 1000% blame the Zionists.
Two worlds, two histories, two emotional languages. And at first, that contrast pulled them together. Later, it pushed them apart. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Because while the internet is filled with wild theories, outrageous claims, and messy speculation,
against Erica Kirk, his wife, I mean, you have to be cruel and demonic to insinuate the things that she has insinuated over the past several weeks. She's evil. Some point, her husband is going to have to walk into that podcast room and start unplugging cords. I mean, by now I would have already done it if it was my wife.
George didn't leave because of a scandal, a betrayal, or some explosive secret. According to a source who knows him personally, he left because he realized he couldn't follow her into the storms she kept walking toward. Let that sink in. This wasn't about one moment. It wasn't about one fight. It wasn't about one controversy. It was about a pattern.
One of the donors to Turning Point USA was telling him it would be very bad for my brand. And that really stuck with me. That one of the donors said, it would be very bad for your brand for you to not marry a black guy from the projects or something like that.
While Candace's public battles got louder against political enemies, louder against critics, louder against anyone who crossed her, George reportedly grew quieter, more distant, more withdrawn. Candace fights for impact. George lives for stability. Candace runs toward confrontation. George walks away from it. Candace builds by shaking things. George builds by keeping things still. And eventually, those differences didn't feel exciting anymore. They felt exhausting.
Judaism is a faith. Israel is a state, and it is not above critique, and that what Bibi Netanyahu has done to the Palestinians since October 7th is a halt.
The marriage became two people living inside the same house, but standing inside two different worlds. Now, here's the moment that changed everything. According to people close to the situation, George reached a point where he felt he was no longer a partner. He was a shield, a buffer, the calm after the storm, the cleanup crew after every online explosion. And at some point, love wasn't enough to hold that position anymore. He reportedly told a friend, "I married the woman everyone sees online, but I ended up living with someone the public will never understand." Not cruel, not hateful, just honest. A man admitting something he probably denied for years. And when he finally spoke privately about the separation, he didn't blame her personality, her career, her beliefs, or her ambition. According to the source, he said he didn't leave because she's bad. He left because he couldn't be the man she needed. And that is far more heartbreaking than any scandal. Because that is a truth couples all around the world face every day. Sometimes love isn't the problem. Compatibility is. Sometimes two strong people can admire each other deeply and still destroy each other slowly. Sometimes the thing you love about a person when you meet them becomes the thing you can't handle years later. That's the emotional weight behind his statement. She's not what you think. Not a monster. Not a villain. Not an angel. Just human. Complex. Contradictory. Hard to love and impossible to ignore. But where does that leave Candace? Because regardless of what people think of her, whether they admire her, dislike her, or simply watch her from a distance, she is not someone who breaks quietly. People close to her say she took the separation harder than expected, not because of the marriage ending, but because of what it represented. Losing someone who stood beside her in some of her roughest years. Losing a man who balanced her fire with his calm. Losing the one person she believed would remain steady no matter how wild her world became. According to an insider, she didn't expect him to walk away. She thought he understood the price of her voice. And that's the tragedy. Both believed the other should have understood. Both believed the other knew what they were signing up for. Both believed the foundation would hold. But foundations crack quietly, long before the building finally collapses. And now, Candace moves through life with a different kind of armor. More guarded, more sharp, more selective about who gets close, more aware of how people view her intensity. George, on the other hand, has stepped into a quieter existence, a life away from pressure, spotlight, and constant tension, a life that feels more like the one he grew up in. But the truth? Their stories are still connected. Not romantically, emotionally. Because whether it's a marriage, a friendship, or a partnership, when two people break apart after building so much together, pieces don't disappear. They stay inside you. They stay in your habits, your fears, your memories, your reactions. And that is what makes this ending so powerful. Not the drama, not the headlines, not the internet noise. The human part. Two people who tried. Two people who loved. Two people who couldn't make it work. Two people who walked away, not because they hated each other, but because they were hurting each other. That's real. That's raw. And that's what keeps viewers watching stories like this. Because beneath the fame, beneath the microphones, beneath the politics, these people are still human, still flawed, still searching for the version of love that doesn't break them. So when George said, "She's not what you think," maybe he wasn't exposing her. Maybe he was finally exposing the truth of their relationship. A truth many couples know, but few speak out loud. In the end, this story isn't just about a marriage falling apart. It's about two people who reached their limit, silently, painfully, and far earlier than anyone realized. George walked away because he couldn't survive the storms anymore, and Candace continues forward, carrying the weight of a life that never stops shaking. But here's the real question. When the spotlight fades and the noise quiets, who will she become without him? And who will he be without her? One thing is certain, this breakup didn't end the story. It only opened a new chapter no one is ready for.